Good evening, I'm Jim Whaley. Tonight, Cinema Showcase is coming to you from the USA Film Festival in Dallas, and I am privileged and proud to have as my guest one of the foremost figures in the world of motion pictures, Mr. Willi Wyler. A three-time Academy Award winner for directing The Best Years of Our Lives, Mrs. Miniver, and Ben-Hur, his pictures are indeed legendary. So join me tonight as I talk with Willi Wyler on Cinema Showcase. Thank you very much for joining Cinema Showcase tonight. And Mr. Wyler, I want to thank you for taking this time out.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Delighted to take part in the Dallas Film Festival, where I'm having a very good time. It's sort of a nice ego trip for me. Also, I feel I owe a great deal to Dallas because my wife is a Dallas girl. Mm-hmm. SMU graduate.
Yeah.
You know, she came to Hollywood as a young actress, and she made a test for Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. Fortunately for me, she didn't get the part.
I know I was at the screening of Jezebel last night, and she was recognized from the podium and got a nice round of applause. It must have been nice for her.
Yes, I think she's enjoying it very much.
What do you think are the value of film festivals? Do they serve a good purpose, do you think, of film festivals in general?
Well, for me, just last November I returned from one in Tehran, where we had now this one. So I'm enjoying them very much. There are so many of them now. Mm-hmm. It used to be that there was just the Academy Awards and Cannes and one or two others. Now they're everywhere, and I think it's a fine thing for films because films are the new art form, mm-hmm. the new art form of the 20th century. And while many years ago, when I first started making pictures, I mean, being in a film business was sort of a little bit disreputable. And it wasn't quite legitimate business. So it's nice to be recognized, not only as legitimate business, but even as an art form, which I believe it is.
Indeed. Well, film festivals today give students such a good opportunity to view films and to study films, don't they?
Yes, I find the students asking very intelligent questions and being very, very bright and aware of both the technique and the artistic parts of films, such as writing, directing, acting, and they're very, very alert.
Mm-hmm. You know, the Dallas Film Festival is a bit unique, I think, in that it only honors American filmmakers, or it invites American films to participate, which is good because I think for so long it was fashionable for some critics to praise anything that came from a foreign country. Every European film was a masterpiece, no matter what, at the expense of American films. Don't you think that was the case?
I remember that time very well, yes. And it was, there's some tendency towards snobbishness about certain things, you know, mm-hmm. like you mentioned, the snobbishness of liking every foreign picture, disliking American films. Mm-hmm. You find some of that in Europe, too. I once had the experience in Europe asking a European critic who liked the picture I made that I didn't like, and I asked him why they praised it so. He said, "Well, we have our prejudices same as you do."
I know the film industry goes in trends. It's always gone in trends. But for the last 15 years or so, I think there has been a trend with certain new filmmakers for a sloppiness and a clumsiness in production, which I find quite distasteful. I wonder have you found this to be so?
Well, yes and no.
The handheld camera and all of that.
Yes, in some instances there are There are new young directors who are very talented and doing very good work. Generally, there's been progress, both technically and artistically. But also, as you point out, sometimes there's a lack of discipline on the part of some filmmakers who who want to show off and at the expense of, or want to draw attention to themselves at the expense of the story and the actors. And sometimes there is confusion, which they don't try to do anything about, you know, and in many instances there's sloppiness. On the other hand, there's been an improvement in the sense that it leaves a little more to the imagination than we used to. And that too, if well done, is an improvement in technique. And to make the audience do a little more thinking than they used to.
Yeah.
You know?
Is there any one thing that you think a good director must have in order to succeed?
Well, he must have, I always felt that in order to make a good film, he must have two things: a passion for his subject and a knowledge of his craft. These two things, I think, are essential. We often make films that where we're not really deeply interested in the subject matter. It's a question of just making another film. It's time to make another film, so you choose a subject, and every director's done that, including me. But the films that come off best, as I look back over many years of filmmaking, are those in which I've had a personal interest, in which I had a sort of a passion for the subject matter.
Yeah.
And of course, that is not enough, as I said. Then you must have a knowledge of your craft and, if possible, an imaginative application of that knowledge.
And I guess it takes a lot of stamina sometimes too, doesn't it?
Yes, making films is very hard work, not only mentally and emotionally, but also physically.
I know a gentleman I know that you know, and I'm very proud to call a friend, Frank Capra, has said that you better like the subject that you're filming because it's going to take a year, sometimes 2 years out of your life, so you'd better like it.
That's right. All the pictures I've made in the last 25 years, they've taken between 1 and 2 years. And not only that, but they also take a lot out of you during that time.
I can imagine. I know you were going to, you thought of directing Patton, I believe, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And I gave it up because I just couldn't face going to Spain for a year, staging tank battles, and that was not, although the subject in the film was very well done, was excellent, and it was a good subject that I liked, was interested in, but I couldn't face going to Spain. I'd been in Italy twice for a year, and I just didn't want to leave home for that long.
Yeah. In fact, Franklin Schaffner, who ended up directing the picture, I think, lost something like 25 pounds the time he was in Spain, so
yes,
it does take something out of it.
He had a rough time of it, and I just didn't feel that I wanted to face it. He also had a rough time with Mr. Scott.
The films in the in this Dallas Film Festival of yours, did you select them? Your films to be shown here?
Yes, I suggested about 10 films. They wanted 7. I said, take any 7 of these 10 that I thought would be suitable and appropriate. Not everybody agrees that these are the best. I mean, some, just the other day I was told, why did you leave out Roman Holiday? And I said, I don't know, I just forgot about it, you know, because Roman Holiday, it's a very nice little picture.
Yeah. Well, I know I've got my own list of maybe 10 or 12 others that I wish had been included, but you can't include everything, I guess. So, of the films that are in the festival, Is there one, I suppose Best Years of Our Lives would be one that stands out, isn't it?
Yes, well, it's one of my favorites. It's difficult to say which is exactly the most favorite film of mine. I can't get it down to just one, because there's so many different types of films. See, I have tried to diversify and make different types of films, such as Ben-Hur and Funny Girl, music. Those are not really my style, my type of film. I mean, I didn't feel very passionate about these pictures, but they were sort of a challenge, because I had never done that sort of film before. So I accepted to do them to see if I knew how to do this kind of picture. Well, as I look back upon many years of filmmaking, the ones that give me the most satisfaction are not always the ones that are most successful, but they're the ones that contributed something to the social times, to the life of the times in which they were made, such as The Best Years of Our Lives, which I think made it a lot easier for many veterans, for people to understand veterans returning from the war, or a picture like Mrs. Miniver, which made a small contribution towards the war effort, being a propaganda film, really, and so on. And those films are give me a great sense of satisfaction because of that.
Well, I think I can safely say you have contributed, I can say, I think, more than any filmmaker to just what you were describing, because your films, I think, are going to, they're going to be around.
There are others that are just pure entertainment.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Funny Girl and Roman Holiday and films like that, and they have their place, sure. Or Ben-Hur, which is pure adventure story.
You know, talking about Ben-Hur, I think at the time you were accused by some of the more snobbish critics for inflating the film or so forth, but the story cried out for that, didn't it?
Yes, of course. If I had, I mean, Ben-Hur was never intended to be anything artistic. If I had tried to make an artistic film of Ben-Hur, it would have failed both artistically and commercially. It is not a sophisticated story. It is a very elementary story of good people, bad people, Romans of the time, the Romans and the Jews at the time of Judea. But it did have one significant thing. It showed that 2,000 years ago, as today, the people in Judea, which is Israel, were fighting for their freedom, same as they are today. Not much has changed, except that the Arabs took the place of the Romans. The situation is very similar.
But in that instance, the story actually dictated the size of the film.
The story is very elementary, you know. For instance, we could have a chariot race. We could have a cross-country chariot race, which would be very inexpensive to do. You could go through the hills and the woods in Italy, and you wouldn't have to build a huge stadium with 2,000 extras. But that's not the way they had them. So
That's amazing. How authentic was that arena? It was a masterpiece of design.
Yes. Oh, it was quite authentic. It was, I think, it was embellished a little bit. Those huge figures were dreamt up by our own architect, and I think they did a great deal. Of course, there were arenas all over the place in those days. They had arenas. You find ruins today in France and Greece and in Sicily and in Italy, everywhere. So, but this was supposed to be the Circus Maximus, and I think it was embellished a little bit for the benefit of the film.
Yeah, you know, though, for a picture that some people called unartistic, it still won a record 11 Academy Awards, which is a record that has not been topped yet. And I don't think it will be, because 11 Oscars is quite a lot.
Yes, I think that's that still is a record for the Academy Awards.
This would apply to really any of your films. How meticulously do you pre-plan?
Oh, very meticulously. Everything is planned. That doesn't mean that it's executed exactly as planned, because many times, I mean, you plan it on paper, but when you get on a set with the real people, then you make changes. You're bound to make changes because things don't always come off with the people as it does when you're just imagining it, you know. So you have to be open to changes, you know, and you do make them constantly.
So then you do allow for improvisation on the set? Do you allow your actors to...
Some improvisation, yes, depending on if you get an idea. If you see something isn't working properly, doesn't come off the way you expect it to, or you have a better idea, then of course you make use of it.
What about letting your actors contribute to this? I know there are directors
who
who won't let their
do. I not only let them, I demand that they contribute, that they act. They can't just act with their body, they have to think too, you know. And many times an actor would make a suggestion that is very good and have a way of playing a scene that was perhaps better than I had thought of. And in that case, he can certainly have his way. I want the actors to be thinking. They can't just come on the set and say, well, what do you want, you know, and just be obedient. I don't want just obedience. Of course, if we don't disagree on something, then it's got to go my way.
That's right. That's right.
But they are the ones have to do it. They are the ones have to put themselves into the skin of another person. They are the ones have to do the performance. I can help them, but I can't do it for them.
Yeah. I don't understand, though, how some directors can totally shut out the input that the actor can give them, because some directors just won't listen to their actors. I know Hitchcock, for example.
Yes, that's what he says.
But I wonder if it's true. Do you think...
I wonder, too.
Yeah.
I think that when Hitch has good actors, that he does, you know, I don't think he can make automatons out of them. But, however, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. How would you describe your manner on the set? You have been described as a taskmaster. Charlton Heston, in fact.
Oh, yes. It wasn't always meant as a compliment, you know. It was... And there have been stories going around that I would shoot a scene 40 times and so on. These are all tremendous exaggerations. And because if you put an actor through a scene 4 or 5, 6 times, you know, he's got to become wooden and mechanical if you do it too often. But sometimes if the scene is important enough and there are reasons to do it again, I will do it again. Sometimes you have to compromise.
Yeah. In fact, there's a famous quote from Charlton Heston who said, making a picture with Willi Wyler is like getting the works in a Turkish bath. You're nearly drowned, but you come out smelling like a rose. When a script is submitted to you, do you know right away if it's right for you?
Well, yes, generally I could feel whether it intrigues me or not, whether it's the subject matter excites me or leaves me cold. You know, that's why I have refused many pictures and films that eventually were very successful, but they were just not my cup of tea. Or they didn't excite me for some other reason. So that I would, you know, because you think about it a lot before you put a year or two of your life into a thing. You really have to get excited about it and be personally involved. And it shows, too, in a film. I think it shows eventually whether the director was passionately involved in a subject or whether he was just doing a job.
That's right. That's right.
It's bound to show in a film. Take a picture like Best Years of Our Lives. Actually, it was one of the easiest films I ever made because I was a veteran myself. I had returned from the war. I knew these people well. I knew how they felt, and there were no problems. I never had to worry about how would how would a Roman feel 2,000 years ago in a situation that I'm not familiar with. Here I knew the subject and I knew the people very well, and somehow it showed in the film. It came off as being, people recognized that it was realistic and true to life and factual.
Yeah. Is it, do you think, easier for a film director to get started today than it was when you got started?
No, I don't think it's easier when I started. It's probably more difficult.
Really? Why, do you think?
Because there's more competition there. Everybody today, more young people ask me, how do you get started? They all want to be film directors. When I started, there was not all that rush. The film business was smaller. In fact, it was a little bit disreputable, It wasn't quite considered legitimate. And since then, we've acquired respect and all that. But, of course, I began making little two-reel westerns, I think today, people, they have to start in television. From there on, progress to films. But when I began, I made little two-reel westerns. They cost $2,000. I was getting $60 for making one of them. It was done in a week. We made one a week for about 20 weeks. Every week we knocked one off. But it was a great school, and it wasn't too difficult to get. If you had been sort of through the mill, as I was at the Universal Studio, I'd been third assistant, second assistant, assistant to this, assistant to that, and been out. So it was a question of did you know the technique? Did you know how to make a film? And if you wanted to make a two-reel western, and you showed you were ambitious, well, the studio would give you a two-reel western. The risk was not great, And if you knew how to make one, then maybe they gave you a series, half a dozen to make, and so on. Eventually, you progressed to five-reel westerns, and so on. So it was no big trick to get an opportunity. But today, it seems like everybody wants to be a movie director, and there isn't room for everybody. And people, and I've never had to go out and try to find the money to make a film. Today, many filmmakers, they have to get the financing, and that's a whole different thing, I mean, you might be very good at getting financing, but not so good at making films. And
the risks are so large today, aren't they?
Yes, it shouldn't be. They shouldn't be involved in that, I think.
You made films for practically all of the major studios in Hollywood. You worked for Samuel Goldwyn, I know, and for MGM with Mrs. Miniver. What were the differences in the studios? Were there major differences between working for L.B. Mayer and Samuel Goldwyn?
I didn't feel any great major difference, no. I had no problems concerning freedom. I was free to make my picture the way I wanted, and I had no interference, as long as I didn't, well, even budget and time and money spent, the schedule and the budget. If I was reasonably within that time, I wasn't always, often went over schedule, but this is what they were looking out for most of the time. And so I didn't have any problems with the studios about freedom.
Watching Wuthering Heights the other night and Jezebel last night, I was struck again by the beauty of the music. Alfred Newman for Wuthering Heights and Steiner for Jezebel. How important is the dramatic score to your films?
Well, I think these men contribute a great deal to the quality of a film, especially to the effectiveness of the film, especially a dramatic film. And while today some of the scores may seem a little bit over-sentimental, they were right for the times.
And it's still very beautiful music, too.
Yes,
Beautiful.
excellent music.
And Hugo Friedhofer's score for Best Years of Our Lives, magnificent score.
Excellent score,
Yeah.
yes.
You know, some directors have specialized in a particular type of film over the years. But with you, the story has really always been of primary importance.
Oh, I've never been able to make a good film without a good story.
Yeah.
I think that's basic. There, perhaps others can, but I can't.
Yeah, yeah. We only have a very little time left. What advice do you give to young people who come to you?
Well, just that. Get
Just
yourself a good story.
A good story?
And then get yourself good actors, and a good cameraman, and a good cutter, and listen to them.
But I can tell you there are very few directors as great as William Wyler, and it's been a great pleasure talking to you. I want to thank you very much.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Thank you. My thanks to all of you for watching this week from the USA Film Festival. Until next time, good night.